the strange thing that happens before wealth arrives, I want to share with you today something that most people never discover in their entire lifetime. Something that, once you understand it, will completely transform the way you think about money, about abundance, about wealth, and about the life you are living right now. Because there is something strange that happens before wealth arrives. There is a process, an inner movement, an invisible shift that takes place in the depths of your consciousness before a single dollar, a single opportunity, or a single breakthrough ever manifests in your outer world. And if you do not understand this process, you will spend your entire life working harder, trying harder, striving harder, and wondering why the abundance you desire keeps eluding you. Let me begin with the most fundamental truth I know. Consciousness is the only reality. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Consciousness is the only reality. Everything that you see, everything that you touch, everything that you experience in this world of three dimensions, your bank account, your home, your relationships, your circumstances, all of it is the outpicturing, the external expression, the shadow cast by the state of your inner world. The world you see with your physical eyes is not the cause of your experience. It is the effect. It is the result. It is the screen upon which the movie of your inner assumptions is being projected. And until you understand this, you will keep trying to rearrange the screen instead of changing the projector. Now, most people approach wealth in exactly the wrong way. They look at their bank account, they see lack, they feel the anxiety of not enough, and they say, I need to do something to change this. And so they work longer hours, they chase opportunities, they read books about financial strategy, they follow the advice of experts. And some of these things may help on a surface level. But the fundamental problem remains untouched, because the fundamental problem is never out there. The fundamental problem is always the state of consciousness from which you are operating. If you are operating from a state of lack, from a deep inner assumption that you are not wealthy, that wealth is for other people, that money is hard to come by, then no amount of outer activity will permanently change your financial reality, because your inner state will always override your outer efforts. This is the strange thing that happens before wealth arrives. And here is what makes it strange. It happens on the inside before there is any evidence whatsoever on the outside. In fact, it happens in direct contradiction to the evidence on the outside. That is what makes it so difficult for most people to accept. That is what makes it seem almost irrational, almost foolish to the logical mind. Because the logical mind says, show me the money first, and then I will believe I am wealthy. But consciousness works in exactly the opposite direction. You must first assume the feeling of wealth. You must first inhabit the state of the wealthy person. You must first know on the inside what it feels like to have, before the outer world can rearrange itself to reflect that inner knowing back to you. Let me explain what I mean by a state. A state is not just a thought. A state is not just an affirmation you repeat in the morning. A state is the total inner atmosphere of your being. It is the assumption that underlies all your other thoughts. It is what you take for granted about yourself and about life, when you are not consciously thinking about anything at all. Most people, if they are honest with themselves, carry around a default state of financial anxiety, of scarcity, of not enoughness. It hums quietly in the background of their awareness all day long. And because that is their habitual state, that is what their world reflects back to them. Not because the universe is punishing them, not because they are bad people, but because consciousness is faithful. It always, without exception, externalizes whatever state you are inhabiting on the inside. So the strange thing that happens before wealth arrives is this. You must become wealthy in your consciousness before you become wealthy in your experience. You must move, right now in this present moment, into the inner state of a person who has what you desire, not as a performance, not as a pretense, but as a genuine, felt, embodied assumption. You must ask yourself, if I were already the person I desire to be, if abundance were already the reality of my life, how would I feel right now? How would I walk? How would I think? What would I take for granted? And then you must inhabit those feelings, those thoughts, those assumptions as your present reality, even while your outer circumstances are still telling a different story. Now I know what your rational mind is saying right now. It is saying, but this is dishonest. This is self deception. I cannot pretend to have what I do not have. And I want to address that directly, because this objection reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of how reality works. You are not pretending, you are not lying to yourself. You are doing something far more profound than that. You are exercising the most powerful faculty you possess, your imagination, to move into a state that is just as real as the state you currently occupy and far more aligned with what you truly desire. The state of wealth exists, it is real. Other people inhabit it. The only question is whether you will choose to inhabit it too. And the only thing that has ever kept you out of it is your habitual assumption that it belongs to someone else and not to you. Imagination is not fantasy. Imagination is the creative power of the universe operating through you. When you imagine vividly, when you feel the reality of what you are imagining, when you inhabit a scene in your mind with all the sensory richness of actual experience, you are not daydreaming. You are planting a seed in the soil of consciousness that must, by the very nature of reality, eventually externalize itself in your physical world. The Bible says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Not as a man thinks in his surface mind, in his heart, in the deep feeling level of his being. What you truly believe, not what you say you believe, not what you hope is true, but what you actually assume to be true at the deepest level of your consciousness. That is what manifests in your life. And this is where most people stumble. They try to think positive thoughts about money while simultaneously feeling deep anxiety about their bills. They try to affirm abundance while a voice in the back of their mind is screaming about the rent that is due. And they wonder why nothing changes. The reason nothing changes is that the feeling always wins. The deep inner assumption always overrides the surface affirmation. You cannot fool your own consciousness. It knows what you truly believe, and it faithfully reproduces that belief in your outer experience. So the work, the real work, the inner work that precedes all outer manifestation, is the work of changing your fundamental assumptions about yourself and about your relationship with wealth. This is not easy. I will not pretend it is easy. It requires discipline. It requires what I would call the controlled use of your imagination. It requires that you deliberately, consistently, repeatedly return to the inner state of the person you desire to be, until that state becomes your natural, default, habitual way of being. Until you no longer have to consciously reach for the feeling of abundance, because it has become simply who you are. It has become your new normal, your new assumption, your new point of departure from which all your thoughts and actions naturally flow. Let me give you a practical way to understand this. Think of two different people. One person wakes up in the morning, and the very first thing that floods their awareness is anxiety about money, about bills, about debts, about the gap between where they are and where they want to be. Every decision they make throughout the day is colored by this anxiety. The way they speak, the way they act, the opportunities they pursue or fail to pursue. Everything flows from this deep inner state of lack. Now think of another person. This person wakes up in the morning with an inner sense of ease about money. Not because their outer circumstances are necessarily different, but because their inner assumption is different. They have a deep, unquestioned sense that they are provided for, that opportunities come to them naturally, that money flows in their life with ease. And everything about the way they move through the world reflects this inner state. The difference between these two people is not luck. It is not circumstance. It is not even talent or intelligence. The difference is the state they are inhabiting. the state they have accepted as their truth. And the world, which is nothing more than consciousness made visible, responds to each of them accordingly. Now, here is the strange thing I want you to really hear. Before the wealthy person's wealth became visible in the outer world, something happened on the inside. There was a moment, perhaps many moments, compounded over time, when they inhabited the feeling of wealth before wealth showed up, when they felt the ease of abundance in the absence of external evidence, when they dared to assume, against all appearances, that they were the kind of person for whom wealth was natural and inevitable. And that inner assumption, held consistently, eventually broke through into the outer world as actual, tangible, physical wealth. The inner always precedes the outer. The invisible always precedes the visible. This is not a metaphor. This is the mechanics of consciousness. And the reason most people never experience this breakthrough is that they cannot sustain the inner assumption long enough for it to manifest. They feel the feeling of wealth for a few minutes during their morning practice, and then they go out into the world and the outer circumstances immediately overwhelm the inner state. They see the bills on the counter, they check their bank balance, they hear the news about the economy, and the old assumption rushes back in like a flood. And they are right back where they started. The seed was planted, but it was pulled up before it had time to take root and grow. This is why persistence in the inner work is absolutely essential. This is why you must return again and again to the state of the wish fulfilled. Not once, not occasionally, but consistently, persistently, with the determination of someone who has decided that the old story is finished and the new story has already begun. You must become the kind of person who, when the outer world contradicts your inner assumption, does not waver, who looks at the evidence of lack and says quietly, firmly, with deep inner knowing, "This is not my truth. My truth is abundance. My truth is wealth. And what I know on the inside will eventually appear on the outside." I want to talk about sleep for a moment, because this is something that most people overlook entirely. And yet, it is one of the most powerful tools available to you. The state you are in as you fall asleep is the state that your subconscious mind will work with throughout the night. Your subconscious never sleeps. It is always active, always creating, always externalizing whatever assumption it has been given. And the moments just before sleep, that drowsy, hypnagogic state where the conscious mind begins to loosen its grip, those moments are extraordinarily powerful for impressing new assumptions upon the deeper levels of your consciousness. If you fall asleep in a state of financial anxiety, you are feeding that anxiety to the most creative, most powerful level of your mind and telling it to go to work on producing more of the same. But if you fall asleep in the feeling of wealth, if you allow yourself, in those precious moments before sleep, to feel what it would feel like to be financially free, to feel the peace and the ease and the joy of abundance, then you are giving your deeper mind a completely different instruction. You are redirecting the most powerful creative force in your life toward the manifestation of what you truly desire. This is the technique I would urge you to practice every single night. As you lie in your bed, as the world grows quiet around you, construct a simple scene in your imagination, a scene that implies that you have already received what you desire. Not a scene of getting it, not a scene of trying for it, a scene that implies it is already done. Perhaps you are telling a friend about a financial breakthrough you have experienced. Perhaps you are holding a check in your hands. Perhaps you are simply feeling the profound peace of someone who has no financial worries whatsoever. Whatever scene feels most natural and most real to you, dwell in that scene. Feel it with every fiber of your being. Let it be as vivid and as real in your imagination as anything you have ever experienced in the physical world. And then drift off to sleep in that feeling. Do this night after night, week after week, with patience and with faith. And watch what happens, because here is what will happen. The outer world will begin to shift, not always in the ways you expect, not always through the channels you have mapped out in your logical mind. In fact, the ways in which wealth arrives are often surprising, unexpected, even strange. A conversation with someone you barely know opens a door. An idea comes to you in the middle of the night. An opportunity appears that you never could have manufactured through your own effort. A series of coincidences, what some people call luck and what I call the outpicturing of your inner state, begins to conspire in your favor. Because once the inner assumption has been firmly established, once you have truly moved into the state of wealth, at the level of consciousness where creation actually occurs, the outer world has no choice but to rearrange itself to reflect that new inner reality. It is law. It is as certain and as reliable as any law in the physical universe. It has never failed. It cannot fail. Because it is the very nature of consciousness itself. The strange thing that happens before wealth arrives is not something that happens to you. It is something that happens in you. It is a revolution in your inner world. It is the deposing of the old king of lack and the coronation of a new sovereign, the assumption of abundance, the felt reality of wealth, the unshakable inner knowing that you are already the person you desire to be. And from that inner coronation, from that moment of genuine felt assumption, everything in the outer world begins to bow. Circumstances bend, opportunities multiply, resources flow. People appear who are perfectly positioned to help you. Doors open that were previously sealed shut. Not because you forced them open, but because the inner state that attracts them has finally been established within you. You have always had this power. It has never been taken from you. It has simply been misdirected. You have been using the power of your imagination to vividly picture what you do not want, to feel the feelings of lack, to rehearse the scenarios of failure, to assume the worst about your financial future. And the faithful universe, the consciousness that underlies all reality, has simply been saying yes to whatever assumption you have been holding most consistently. It does not judge. It does not discriminate. It does not decide that some people deserve wealth and others deserve poverty. It simply externalizes whatever inner state is being offered to it with the greatest consistency and the greatest feeling. So, the invitation today, the only invitation that has ever mattered, is this: change the inner state, dare to assume, dare to feel right now in this present moment what it would feel like to be wealthy, to be financially free, to be the person you have always known somewhere deep inside that you were meant to be. Do not wait for the outer world to give you permission. Do not wait for circumstances to improve before you allow yourself to feel the feelings of improvement. Go first on the inside. Make the inner move. Plant the seed of your desired reality in the rich soil of your own consciousness. Water it with feeling. Tend it with persistent, faithful imagination. And trust, with the unshakable confidence of someone who understands how reality actually works, that what you have planted on the inside will most certainly appear on the outside, in the fullness of time, in ways more wonderful and more perfect than your logical mind could ever have designed. This is the law. This is the truth. This is the strange and magnificent thing that always, without exception, happens before wealth arrives. The inner world moves first. Consciousness shifts first. The assumption of abundance is established first. And then, the outer world follows. It always follows. It has no choice but to follow, because the world you experience is nothing more and nothing less than your own consciousness, pushed out. And if you truly grasp what I am telling you right now, if it lands not just in your intellect but in the very marrow of your being, you will never look at your financial situation the same way again. You will never again feel like a victim of circumstance. You will never again feel at the mercy of an economy, a job market, a government policy, or any external condition whatsoever. Because you will understand, at the deepest level of your being, that you are not the victim of your world. You are the operant power. You are the creator. You are the one whose inner assumptions are producing the outer experience. and therefore you are the one who has the power to change it. Not by changing the world out there, but by changing the world in here. Let me talk about something that I consider to be one of the greatest obstacles to the manifestation of wealth, and it is something that almost nobody talks about in the way that I want to talk about it now. It is the concept of worthiness, or rather, the deep unconscious assumption of unworthiness that lives in the hearts of so many people who desire abundance but cannot seem to allow it into their lives. Because here is what I have observed and what I know to be true. You can practice every technique, you can repeat every affirmation, you can visualize until you are blue in the face, but if somewhere in the depths of your consciousness there lives an assumption that you do not deserve wealth, that wealth is for other people but not for you, that there is something fundamentally wrong or lacking in you that disqualifies you from the experience of abundance, then that deep assumption will undermine every conscious effort you make. It will be like trying to fill a bucket that has a hole in the bottom. This unworthiness is rarely something that people consciously choose. It is something that was installed in them, usually in childhood, through repeated experiences and messages that told them they were not enough, that money was hard to come by, that wealthy people were different from them in some fundamental way. Maybe you grew up in a home where money was always tight, and the conversation around money was always laced with fear and stress. Maybe you were told, directly or indirectly, that people like you do not become wealthy. Maybe you absorbed, from the culture around you, the belief that there is something morally suspect about wealth, that wanting more is greedy, that being comfortable with abundance is somehow wrong. These beliefs, these assumptions, settle into the subconscious mind like sediment at the bottom of a river, and they color everything. They filter every opportunity, every idea, every possibility through the lens of not for me. And the work of removing these assumptions is the most important inner work you will ever do. Not the work of positive thinking on top of negative assumptions. Not the work of papering over the cracks with affirmations while the foundation remains unstable. But the deep, honest, courageous work of going into your own consciousness and examining what you truly believe about yourself and about your relationship with wealth. And then, one by one, dissolving those old assumptions and replacing them with new ones. Not through force, not through willpower, but through the gentle, persistent, creative power of your imagination, applied consistently in the direction of what you truly desire. I want you to do something right now. I want you to imagine a version of yourself, not a future version, not a distant, someday version, but a version that exists right now in the realm of imagination, which is just as real as the realm of physical sense. A version of yourself that has no conflict with wealth whatsoever. A version of yourself that wakes up in the morning in abundance, feels completely natural, completely normal, completely deserved. Not earned through suffering, not justified through sacrifice. Simply natural. Simply the way things are. The way water is wet and the sky is blue. Wealth is simply the natural condition of this version of you. Can you feel that person? Can you sense that version of yourself, even for a moment? That sense, that feeling, that inner contact with the wealthy version of yourself. That is not fantasy. That is you making contact with a state that already exists in consciousness, a state that is available to you right now, a state that you can choose to inhabit. And the choosing is the key, because this is where free will actually operates, not in the outer world, not in the choice between this job or that job, this investment or that investment. Free will operates in the inner world, in the choice of which state you will inhabit, which assumption you will accept as your truth, which version of yourself you will identify with in this present moment. That is the only choice that ultimately matters, because every outer choice flows from the inner state you are occupying. Change the state, and the outer choices change naturally, effortlessly, as an inevitable consequence. Now let me address the question of time, because this is something that causes enormous frustration for people who are working with these principles. They do the inner work, they feel the feeling of abundance, they inhabit the state of wealth, and then they look at the calendar and they look at their bank account and nothing seems to have changed. And they become discouraged. They begin to doubt. They fall back into the old state of anxiety and lack. And in doing so, they undo the very inner work they have done. They pull up the seed before it has had time to germinate. The interval of time between the planting of the seed and the appearance of the harvest is not a sign that the law is not working. It is simply the nature of manifestation in the physical world. Everything that appears in the physical world has a gestation period. A baby takes 9 months, a tree takes years, and the manifestation of a new financial reality in your life takes whatever time it takes for the inner assumption to fully consolidate and for the outer world to rearrange itself accordingly. Your job during that interval is not to watch anxiously for signs of progress. Your job is to maintain the inner state, to keep returning to the feeling of the wish fulfilled, to refuse to be moved by the appearance of things, to hold the vision with the calm, patient certainty of a farmer who has planted good seed in good soil and knows, without anxiety, that the harvest is on its way. The Bible speaks of this patience in a way that most people miss entirely. It says, "For ye have need of patience, that after ye have done the will of God, ye might receive the promise." After you have done the will of God. The will of God, as I understand it, is not some external command imposed upon you from without. The will of God is the movement of your own deepest creative nature toward the fulfillment of your desires. It is the imagination moving toward the state of the wish fulfilled. And after that inner movement has been made, after the seed has been planted, you need patience. Not passive waiting, not resigned acceptance, but active, faithful patience. The patience of someone who knows that what they have planted must appear, and who simply goes about their daily life in the meantime with an inner sense of calm and certainty. I want to speak now about the role of what I call the inner conversation, because this is something that operates so constantly and so automatically that most people are completely unaware of it. From the moment you wake up in the morning to the moment you fall asleep at night, there is a conversation happening inside you, a running commentary on your life, on your circumstances, on your possibilities. And for most people, this inner conversation is a repetition of the same old story, the story of not enough, of financial struggle, of wealth being just out of reach. And because this inner conversation is so habitual, so automatic, so deeply ingrained, it feels like truth. It feels like simply seeing things as they are. But it is not the truth, it is an assumption. And it can be changed. Begin to monitor your inner conversation about money. Notice what you say to yourself when you look at your bank balance. Notice what you say to yourself when someone else achieves financial success. Notice what you say to yourself when an opportunity presents itself. Is the inner voice one of possibility, of expectation, of natural entitlement to good things? Or is it a voice of doubt, of limitation, of that kind of thing never happens for me? Because that inner voice is not describing your reality, it is creating your reality. Every word of that inner conversation is a seed being planted in the soil of your consciousness. And whatever you plant most consistently, most habitually, most feelingly, that is what will grow. So begin to change the inner conversation. Not by forcing it, not by arguing with it, but by gently, persistently redirecting it toward a new story. When the old voice says, "I will never have enough money," do not fight it. Simply replace it with a new inner statement. Wealth is natural to me. Abundance flows easily in my life. I am the kind of person for whom financial good things happen naturally. Say it quietly, inwardly. Feel it as you say it. Say it not as a desperate affirmation, but as a casual, matter-of-fact statement of how things are. The way you might say the sun rises in the east. With that kind of quiet, unforced certainty. And say it again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. until the new story begins to feel as natural and as automatic as the old one did. Until you catch yourself, in unguarded moments, simply assuming abundance without even trying. This is how the transformation of consciousness actually works. Not in one dramatic moment of revelation, although those moments can and do happen, but in the steady, patient, day by day replacement of old assumptions with new ones. In the gradual shift of your default inner state from one of lack to one of abundance. It is like turning an ocean liner. You do not turn it in an instant. You apply steady pressure in the new direction, and slowly, imperceptibly at first, the great ship begins to change course. And once it has changed course, once the new direction has been established, it moves forward with tremendous momentum. And I want to tell you something about that momentum, because this is the part that most people never get to experience, simply because they give up too soon. There comes a point in the inner work, a point that arrives after consistent, faithful practice, where the new assumption has taken such deep root in your consciousness that the outer manifestations begin to accelerate, where things begin to happen so quickly, so abundantly, so far beyond what you consciously planned or strategized, that it almost takes your breath away, where wealth begins to flow into your life through channels you never imagined, in amounts that exceed what your old consciousness could have accepted, where you look at your life and you barely recognize it as the same life, because the inner shift has been so profound that the outer world has been completely transformed to match it. This is what people from the outside call luck. They say that person is so lucky. Everything seems to fall into place for them. Money seems to come to them so easily. But it is not luck. It has never been luck. It is the outpicturing of an inner state that has been cultivated, tended, and maintained with patience and with faith. It is the harvest of seeds that were planted in consciousness, sometimes long before the harvest became visible to the physical eye. And every single person who is experiencing that kind of abundant life was at some point exactly where you are right now, standing at the threshold of a new consciousness, feeling the tension between the old story and the new one, making the choice, day by day, moment by moment, to inhabit the new state rather than retreat into the comfort of the familiar old one. And yes, I said the comfort of the familiar old one, because here is something that is deeply true and deeply important. Even painful states are comfortable in a certain way, simply because they are familiar. The anxiety of financial lack, as miserable as it is at least known, it is at least predictable. And the human consciousness, in its tendency toward homeostasis, will often choose the familiar misery over the unfamiliar joy. This is why so many people, when good things begin to happen in their financial lives, unconsciously sabotage them. Why a person who receives an unexpected sum of money somehow manages to lose it just as quickly. Why opportunities appear and then inexplicably fall apart. Why the pattern of lack keeps reasserting itself no matter how many outer changes are made. It is because the inner state of lack has not truly changed. The old assumption still sits on the throne of consciousness, and it will not give up its sovereignty without a fight. This is why the inner work must be thorough. It must go all the way down to the root of the assumption. Not just surface affirmations and positive thinking, but a genuine, deep, felt shift in what you take for granted about yourself and about your relationship with wealth. A genuine willingness to let go of the old identity, the identity of someone who struggles financially, and to step fully into the new identity, the identity of someone for whom abundance is simply the natural order of things. And this stepping into the new identity requires a kind of death. The old self must die so that the new self can live. The old story must end so that the new story can begin. And that death, that ending, can feel disorienting and even frightening. Because who are you if you are not the person who struggles? Who are you if lack is no longer your story? You are who you have always been at the deepest level. You are consciousness itself, temporarily identified with a particular story, a particular set of assumptions, a particular state. And you have the power, right now in this very moment, to choose a different state, to tell a different story, to assume a different truth about yourself and about what is possible for your life. That power has never left you. It has simply been sleeping, waiting for you to wake up to it, waiting for you to stop outsourcing your creative power to circumstances and to take it back where it belongs, into your own hands, into your own imagination, into your own consciousness. The wealthy person is not wealthy because of what they have done. They are wealthy because of what they have assumed. And the assumption preceded everything else. It preceded the opportunities, the connections, the strategies, the hard work, the right timing. All of those things were simply the means by which consciousness externalized the inner assumption of wealth into the outer world. The assumption was first. It is always first. It will always be first. Because in the architecture of reality, consciousness is the foundation upon which everything else is built. Change the foundation, and everything built upon it must change as well. So, I urge you, with everything I know and everything I have come to understand about the nature of reality and the mechanics of consciousness, to take this inner work seriously. More seriously than you take your outer efforts. More seriously than you take your financial planning, your career strategy, your investment decisions. Not because those outer things do not matter, but because without the corresponding inner shift, they will never produce the lasting, abundant results you truly desire. But with the inner shift, with a consciousness genuinely rooted in the assumption of abundance, every outer effort you make will be amplified, every opportunity you pursue will bear fruit, every strategy you employ will work in ways that exceed your expectations, because you will be working with the grain of the universe rather than against it. You will be aligned with the creative power that underlies all of reality, and that power, when it is fully engaged on your behalf, is literally irresistible. The strange thing that happens before wealth arrives is already happening in you right now, in this very moment, as these words land in your awareness. And something deep inside you recognizes them as true. That recognition, that quiet inner yes, is not accidental. It is the beginning of a shift. It is consciousness beginning to move in a new direction. It is the first stirring of a seed that has been planted. And if you will nurture that stirring, if you will give it the water of consistent feeling and the sunlight of faithful imagination, it will grow. It will grow beyond what you can currently see or measure or predict. It will grow into a life of abundance, so natural, so complete, so thoroughly woven into the fabric of your daily experience, that you will look back on this moment as the turning point. The moment when you finally understood how it all works. The moment when you stopped waiting for the world to change and began instead to change yourself. The moment when you accepted, fully and without reservation, that you are not the product of your circumstances, but the producer of them. That you are not the observer of your financial reality, but the creator of it. And from that moment, from that acceptance, from that assumption, everything begins to shift. Slowly at first, perhaps, then with gathering speed and force and abundance, until the life you have always known was possible for you. The life that has always existed as a potential within your own consciousness, waiting only for you to claim it, begins to appear all around you in the most beautiful, the most unexpected, the most gloriously specific ways. Because consciousness is faithful, it always delivers. It has never once failed to externalize whatever has been truly, deeply, feelingly assumed within it. The only variable has ever been you. The only question has ever been, what will you assume? What will you accept as your truth? What state will you inhabit today, tonight, tomorrow morning, when you first open your eyes and the world rushes in? Will you inhabit the state of lack, of struggle, of not enough? Or will you dare, will you have the courage and the faith and the magnificent audacity to inhabit the state of wealth, of abundance, of more than enough, before a single external thing has changed to justify that feeling, that daring, that courage, that willingness to go first on the inside. That is the strange thing. That is the thing that most people can never quite bring themselves to do. And that is precisely why most people never experience the wealth that is, by the very nature of consciousness, available to every single one of them. Not because the universe is withholding it, not because they are not deserving of it, but simply because they have not yet made the inner move. They have not yet dared to feel wealthy before wealth arrived. They have not yet understood that the feeling does not follow the manifestation. The feeling precedes it. The feeling calls it forth. The feeling is, in the most literal and most profound sense, the very substance from which the manifestation is made. Feel it now. Feel it tonight as you drift into sleep. Feel it tomorrow morning before your feet touch the floor. Feel it in the middle of the day when circumstances tempt you back into the old story. Keep feeling it. Keep returning to it. Keep choosing it over and over again with the patient faithfulness of someone who knows, who truly knows, that what they are planting in consciousness must, by law, by the unbreakable nature of reality itself, eventually appear in the world of form. And in that knowing, in that faithfulness, in that consistent, courageous inner assumption, wealth is not on its way to you. Wealth is already yours. It has always been yours. You are simply, finally, beautifully, allowing yourself to know it. And so I bring you back to where we began, but I bring you back as a different person than the one who arrived at the beginning of these words. Because something has happened in you during the course of this conversation. Something has shifted, even if you cannot yet name it or measure it or point to it with your finger. A door has been opened in your consciousness that cannot be fully closed again. Because once you truly see how reality works, once you truly understand that the world you are experiencing is the world you have been assuming, you cannot unsee it. You cannot go back to the comfortable blindness of believing that circumstances are happening to you rather than through you. That knowledge is now yours. And with it comes a responsibility that is both sobering and magnificent. Because knowledge without application is simply entertainment. And I have not shared these truths with you today to entertain you. I have shared them because I genuinely believe that every single person who has received these words carries within them an unfulfilled potential for abundance that the world desperately needs to see expressed. Not just for your own sake, although your own flourishing matters deeply and completely, but because a person who is living in abundance, who is free from the anxiety of lack, who is operating from a consciousness of more than enough, that person changes everything around them. They give more freely, they love more generously, they create more boldly. They inspire others simply by the quality of their presence, by the evidence of what becomes possible when a human being dares to align their inner world with the truth of who they really are. You were not created for lack. You were not designed for struggle. You were not placed on this earth to spend your days in the grinding anxiety of financial insufficiency, counting pennies and cutting corners and wondering whether this month will be the month when it all falls apart. That is not the life that was intended for you. And deep in the place where you are most honest with yourself, you have always known that. There has always been a voice, quiet perhaps, easy to dismiss but persistent, that has told you there is more. That abundance is not only possible but natural. That the life you have glimpsed in your most hopeful moments, the life that appears in your imagination when you allow yourself to dream without restriction, that life is not a fantasy, it is a blueprint. It is consciousness showing you what it is capable of producing when you give it the right material to work with. The right material is your assumption. The right material is your feeling. The right material is the state you choose to inhabit in the privacy of your own inner world, where no one else can see and no one else can judge, and nothing external can interfere. That inner world is your sanctuary and your workshop and your laboratory all at once. It is where every great life has been built before it was ever visible to the physical eye. It is where every financial breakthrough has been conceived before it was ever experienced in the physical world. It is the most important place in your entire universe, and it is completely, exclusively, permanently yours. No circumstance can enter your inner world without your permission. No economy, no government, no past failure, no present difficulty, no other person's opinion or judgment or prediction. None of it can touch the sovereign territory of your own consciousness unless you allow it to. And from this day forward, I urge you with everything I am to become fiercely protective of that inner world, to become deliberate about what you allow to take root there, to become the conscious, intentional architect of the assumptions you carry, the feelings you cultivate, the states you inhabit. Because in that deliberateness, in that intentionality, in that conscious stewardship of your own inner world, lies the complete and total solution to every financial limitation you have ever experienced. The wealth you desire is not out there somewhere, waiting for the right conditions to appear. It is in here, waiting for the right assumption to be made. It is waiting for you to stop asking the world to change first, and to make the bold, courageous, magnificent decision to change first yourself. To go first on the inside, to feel first what you wish to experience, to know first what you wish to see, to be first person you wish to become. And in that going first, in that feeling first, in that being first, you set in motion forces that are ancient and powerful and utterly reliable, forces that will move heaven and earth if necessary to bring the outer world into alignment with the inner truth you have dared to claim. This is not wishful thinking. This is not the naive optimism of someone who has never faced real financial hardship. This is the deepest truth about the nature of reality that I know how to express in human language. And it has been true since before the foundation of the world. It was true before any of us arrived on this earth, and it will be true long after we have departed. The law of consciousness is eternal and unchanging. What you assume, you become. What you feel as real, you experience as real. What you inhabit on the inside, you manifest on the outside. Without exception, without favoritism, without regard to your past, your background, your education, your age, your nationality, or any other outer condition whatsoever. The playing field of consciousness is perfectly level. Every single human being on this earth has access to the same creative power. Every single human being has the same imagination, the same capacity for feeling, the same ability to choose their inner state. The only difference between those who are living in abundance and those who are living in lack is the difference in what they have assumed, what they have felt, what they have taken for granted about themselves and about life. And that difference, that single, crucial, all-important difference, is something you have the power to change right now. Today, in this very moment. So let this be the moment. Let this be the day that you look back on years from now and say, that was when everything changed. Not because anything in my outer world changed that day, but because something in my inner world shifted permanently and irrevocably. Because I finally understood, at a level deeper than intellectual comprehension, that I am the operant power in my own life, that I am the creator of my own experience, that the wealth I have always desired has always been available to me, waiting only for me to assume it as my truth. Let this be that day. Go from this place different. Go from this place awake. Go from this place with the unshakable inner, knowing that you are not at the mercy of the world, but the master of your own consciousness, and therefore the master of your own destiny. Carry the feeling of abundance with you like a quiet, steady flame that nothing and no one can extinguish. Return to it every morning, protect it every day, deepen it every night as you surrender to sleep. And watch with the patient, faithful, joyful expectation of someone who understands exactly how reality works, as the world around you begins to reorganize itself, to reconfigure itself, to reshape itself in the most beautiful and specific and personal ways, all in response to the new truth you have dared to claim in the only place where truth is ever actually created, in the magnificent, sovereign, infinitely powerful territory of your own consciousness. The strange thing has already begun. It began the moment these words first landed in your awareness. It began the moment something in you recognized the truth and said yes. And that yes, quiet as it may have been, tentative as it may have felt, was enough. It is always enough. Because consciousness does not require perfection. It does not require that you never doubt or never waver or never feel the pull of the old story. It requires only that you keep returning, keep choosing, keep assuming, keep feeling, keep going back to the inner state of the person you truly are, beneath all the layers of conditioned limitation and inherited lack and accumulated fear. The person you truly are is already wealthy, already free, already whole, already enough, already more than enough. And the world is about to find out.